All right, we are live from the Israel Stir. So here we go. All right, so I brought a lot of books with me today. There's a lot to talk about. We are in Reish Ayin Aleph. We were in the middle of Sif Yud. I'll get my shulchan open also. And we're going to reread the beginning of Yud. We did do the one part of the Mishnah Berurah here, but then we'll go into great depth about the various different topics that relate to the Kos Shel Kiddush, and how we ensure that our Kos is doing the right thing, and that how we are doing the right thing when we make Kiddush. So, Sif Yud. So, Reish Ayin Aleph, Sif Yud. It's 4 lines down from the top of the page. Where it says, in my edition, it says 94 in the top right-hand corner. So 4 lines down, middle of the line, Sif Yud. So the Shulchan Aruch here writes, Mekadesh al kos male yayin, shelo yihiyeh pogum. That you should make Kiddush over a full cup of wine, and it should not be,
flawed.
It shouldn't be, it's a bit word for pogum. I don't know, the contaminated, exactly, right? It shouldn't be a cup that is really not worthy enough fitting to make Kiddush upon. So we talked about last time that kos male yayin, while some define a kos male yayin as literally spilling over the edges, it has to sort of reach, it has to be on, to be all the way up to the ridge, and it basically needs to be coming over the top. It's a messy method. There was another approach, which was to say that a kos malayayin is a kos malayayin. It's a full cup of wine, and the way that normal people would look at a cup and say that's a full cup, that also is a sufficient definition of full, and therefore there's no need for the spilling over the top. Some people, when we get to the laws of Havdalah, some people at Havdalah are more makpid to have the wine spill over the top because we say the phrase, right. Well, not close to Shuas Esla V'Shem Hashem Eka. Idea there's an extra in you. When we get to Havdalah, we'll talk about it of the end of the kos, spilling over. But okay, bottom line is it needs to be a full cup. It needs to have at least a revius of wine inside of it. And if you didn't have, Mishnah Berurah had pointed out last time, if you don't have enough to make a full cup, or you at least have a revius, so but it's still fine sort of after the fact. Better to have a full cup of wine. So if you're going to have a full cup of wine, that means don't use the biggest goblet out there, otherwise you're going to have to pour a lot of wine. So try to be thoughtful about which cup you're using. So, and then we said the other thing we mentioned just now was pogum. We can't have a kos pogum. Let's take a look at Sifkat Mem Gimel on the Mishnah Berurah. So it's the left-hand column, two columns of Mishnah Berurah on this page. Left-hand column, Shelo Yihiyeh Pogum. Hainu she'im shosa echad mimenu, that if you drank from the cup, you had poured a cup of wine and you drank from it. Pigamo v'ein lekade shalav. It is now contaminated and it's not to be made. You can't use it for Kiddush at this point. When you make Kiddush, it has to be from a cup that has wine in it that has not been drunk. So if I have a full cup of wine and I poured it an hour before Shabbos, I was preparing for Shabbos. I took some sips of wine, and now it's Friday night. I still have the same cup of wine. I can't then take that cup of wine and lift it up and make Kiddush with that cup. That would be a kos pogum, and you're not supposed to make Kiddush over a kos pogum.
Rav?
Yeah?
Rav, you taught in an earlier year that... Rav?
I hear you. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
You taught that there is no eating or drinking till after Kiddush. How does one sip the wine before Kiddush?
So let's assume that this wine, was, I guess I said, an hour before Shabbos. Someone was preparing Shabbos, they were getting ready and finishing up the cooking, and they're taking sips of wine and they put
Okay.
the glass down. That's the case of Kos Pogum. Right. They shouldn't be obviously sipping the wine after Shabbos starts. Let's assume that they didn't do that wrong. Let's assume it was from before Shabbos and the cup was left out. Um, yeah. We have to also, when we talk about some of the things we're dealing with now, we have to remember that their standards for, I don't want to say hygiene, but for norms, in terms of using cups and plates and whatnot, may be different than ours. We have easy access to a sink to pour things out, and we have Baruch Hashem, an abundance of things, in our neck of the woods, in terms of like, okay, so if I didn't finish the whole cup of wine, I'll pour it out. It's fine. I'll have a new cup, fresh cup of wine, a little later. But that may not have been the case for most people. They wanted to keep their wine. They didn't necessarily want to pour it down the drain. They didn't have such a thing, even drains.
Okay.
What was that?
First of all, adding on to the top after the drink.
Well, we're going to get to that. That may be a way actually to fix your problem. But yes, so Kos Pogum, now the Mishnah Berurah here says in Mem Gimel, V'ayin le'el b'simen kuf pei beis, shesham evoar prate dinim Kos Pogum. Just take a look at Siman Kuf Pei Beis. There it talks about some of the details of the laws of Kos Pogum. Now, when I took over this year, 9 years ago, I started in Kuf Pei Ches, for those of you who were keeping track and keeping score at home. So this was a little before my time coming here that you learned Kos Pogum. So I assume that you remember, because it was not that long ago, the laws of Kos Pogum. But in case you needed a refresher, I did bring my Hilchot Bays. By the way, you see how well worn it was. This was like when I used until we did Hilchot Shabbat. This is what I used. Anyways, so in Kuf Pei Beis, I'm just giving you some of the dinim of Kos Pogum because it's good to remember. The Shulchan Aruch over there says that you can't have a Kos Pogum, and if you drink from it, that's what makes it Pogum. And in a Kos Pogum, the number one problem is you drank from the cup, and now you have leftover wine in the cup. And he says over there, let's say you're like, I know I'm going to use this later. I don't want it to be pogum. It's an hour before Shabbos, and I'm sipping the wine. Take a little shot glass, and instead of taking a sip from the cup, pour from the cup into something else. That way you'll avoid the kos becoming a kos pogum, a kos where I drank from it. There are, I'm not saying germs in it, but like, I drank from it. It already has my saliva in it, whatever you want to say. Right, that's going to make it a kos pogum. Rather, you should pour it into another kli, and ein bekach klum, and there's no problem of kos pogum. And he says that, then he talks about even if you drink from a jug. Let's say you take a bottle of wine. Okay, we're desperate. I can't find the cup. I uncork the wine bottle, and I go, okay, I whatever. I'll look for a cup later. I take a swig of the wine, from the whole bottle. That's now a bottle of pogum wine you have there. That you've really caused yourself a problem by drinking straight from the bottle. And he gives an exception though. What if it's an eighth made? It's a barrel that's made out of it's a large wooden barrel. Maybe then you don't have to be so careful about that. But anyways, and there are some who even say yesh mi she'omer she'afilu mayim pegumim psulim limzog bahem kos shel bracha, because they used to dilute their wine. Right, their wine was too strong. So even if you had a pitcher of water or a cup of water, a glass of water, and you took a drink of the glass of water before Shabbos, put it down on the counter. Again, they didn't just pour water out into the sink like we do. For them to get water was not an easy. They had to go outside and go to the well and get. So you take a drink of water, you put it down. Now it comes Friday night. I need to dilute the wine. He even says that pouring water that you drank from the cup into the kos shel bracha to dilute the wine, that's even problematic in terms of kos pogum, or at least there are those that say that that's a problem. And right, if you take just another thing, if you take the kos pogum and you pour it back into the kankan. Okay, you pour it back into the I think the fancy English word here is the decanter, right? You pour it back into the with the other wine. So then it's kosher. Why? Because of the principle of mishum dekama kama batil. Every drop that pours in is batil to the you have kos pogum and you have regular wine, right? And so whenever as the wine is dripping into the decanter, every drop that comes in is batel, is nullified in the vast pool of the kosher wine that is perfectly fine. And a couple more facts. So you can fix a kos pogum. This is the most important part, I think, probably to teach everybody. Yichol l'taken kos pogum al yedei sheyosifu me'at yayin. How do you fix a kos pogum? You add wine to the cup. So if you take a drink from the cup of wine, and now this is like again, kos pogum is not like it's not kosher wine. It's perfectly kosher wine. Just if you're going to use it for a bracha, you're going to use it to make kiddush or havdalah. It's not. We want it to be, pristine, right? So how do you fix that pristineness? You can pour new wine from the bottle into the cup, and that will suffice to remove. Even if you used water, some say, even if you used water to dilute further the cup, you're using sort of pristine water or pristine wine, you can remove this status of kos pagum, and therefore then go ahead and make kiddush and Abdallah. And this context over here in the earlier simon was about the cup for Birkas Hamazon. Then it's fine to use.
Is there quantity limit?
Is there
Minimum quantity that you have to add? Or
I don't think so. I think that even here the word is as you say, there's a minimum amount here. The Indian pogum ain't no psul mamish because he says the Mishnah Berurah explains pogum is not a real psul. It's not a real situation where the wine is invalid. Ella pagam ba'alma. It's like a little something. It's a little. It'd be nicer if you were going to use it for a bracha that it shouldn't have been drunk, from, straight up. Mishum sheshastem enu ma'at ulakach shechozer mosif alav nasa metukan bekach. If you just add something, you're fixing it. It's not a real problem. It's like a kind of a problem. And that's why perhaps even with the water, if you add it in, that can also fix the situation. Yeah. Oh, for sure. But their wine in Talmudic times was very strong. Everyone had to dilute the cup. Right. Correct. So today, the water situation is not relevant because the wines are bottled in a way such that you open them and they're ready to be consumed. That wasn't the case when you had a barrel of wine. It was. I don't know how to best describe it. It was just a very strong, be a concentrate of it. So therefore, you would take from the barrel into some smaller decanter or whatever something, and that's why if you look in Arvei Psachim, I taught Arvei Psachim for many years in school, but if you look at Arvei Psachim and talk about the Seder, it doesn't say that they poured the first cup of wine or they pour the second cup of wine. What is the word that's used? That's right. Mozgin kos rishon, mozgin kos sheni means they diluted the cup. That's how you got your cup of wine ready, is that you diluted it. Now it was ready to be drunk. So that was the standard in those days. I would be willing to put some money that's not just the Jewish people. I mean, society as a whole, in terms of how they dealt with wine, would probably had to dilute their wines.
This is a practical matter.
Yeah.
You don't have to pour from the into the cup and then put the cup back into the bottle. You can pour it directly if you're going to be using that wine again.
You could just take it directly from the bottle,
not from the cup back into the bottle without any into the cup before you pour it back. Like that's what the people who are going to do it, they add a little wine to the cup and then they pour it back into the bottle.
Interesting. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't think you need to do that because unless you have more wine maybe in your kos than there's left in the bottle, maybe then it would be an issue. But otherwise, you have the laws of bittul on your side. Yes.
So you translated pagum as contaminated. It sounds from everything you said like it's not the vessel itself, because you could pour the wine into another or the wine itself, because you could pour the wine into another cup or add something to the first. It's more like visibly leftover. It's like leftover stuff.
Right. By the way, the word pogum means defective. I just looked up. But
What?
what was that? I said that the word pogum. I actually just looked it up right now in the dictionary quickly. It means defective, right?
Yeah,
Effective?
Yeah,
yeah.
the wine is defective right now. Like but it's not like really a problem. That's what the Mishnah Brewer even says. Not such a problem. That's why even adding a little wine, suffices to fix the problem from a halachic perspective. But sorry, what was the question again, Hinda?
Oh, so it sounds like it's more like you could tell it's leftover. It's visibly leftover.
Whether you could tell or not, it is
Yeah,
leftover.
because,
It is leftover wine. That's the reality. Is that it was already consumed from.
right.
Yeah, that's what makes it puggle. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Simeon.
Something out that I learned in a previous shir about the word limzog or mizug. Mizug is a dilution, and it is the result of the winemaking of the period left you with a very syrupy product.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the word mizug, its only function is used by wine. If you want to say to pour in Hebrew, the word is shvoch,
That's right.
shvicha,
Spoke right, just pour. Yeah.
like shvoch hamascha al hagoyim, pour out your wrath. So
Right.
the word mizug is a dilution because the wine itself from the barrel is very syrupy.
Right. Right. That's you're correct. I don't recall hearing that shoresh used in describing any other drinks that we pour.
Beverage, right?
Okay, so let's go back to the Mishnah Brewer now, and he's going to mention the last halacha that's from Kuf Pei Gimel. But let's go to our Mishnah Brewer now. Okay, the Ayin Sham Sif Zayin in the simon I was just reading from in Sif Zayin. If you take a look over there, it tells you the Bishas Hadchak, meaning when I have no other choice, I have nothing else to work with. I don't have other wine. I'm in a Shas Hadchak. I'm in a less than ideal circumstance. So she'ein lo kos acher. I don't have any other wine. I don't have another cup of wine. Ve'ein lo eitza letakena kos. And I don't have any literally eitza means advice. I don't have any good ideas to fix my cup. Meaning I have no more wine to pour into to dilute. I don't have any water available to dilute. I don't know. I can't fix my cup. So mivarchin al kos pogum. I'm allowed to still go ahead after the fact and then go ahead and make the bracha. Make the kiddush with the kos pogum. It's not ideal, but if you don't have any better options, then you go with that. He says, "V'ayin be'eshel Avraham sif katan lamed the bekiddush shalayla efshar shetov yoser yishikadosh alapas." The Eshel Avraham points out that maybe it's actually better in that circumstance where you have no solution to fix the kos pogum to actually make kiddush on Friday night using the challah instead, because the challah is not pogum, right? So you'll make the kiddush over the bread. That's as good as you can get. Again, that's only going to work on Friday night. Shabbos day, making kiddush over the bread is not a thing. You can only make the kiddush on Friday night using the challah. Okay, now let's go back up to the Shulchan Aruch. Now we dealt with kos pogum. You got to make sure when you make kiddush, it's not a kos pogum, and again, have a full cup of wine. Now the Shulchan Aruch continues back up on top. This is the fifth line of the Shulchan Aruch, fourth word into the line, at least in my edition. V'ta'un kol ma sheta'un kos shel birkas hamazon. Now another line that's not cryptic, but requires you to go searching elsewhere in Shulchan Aruch. We need all that is needed by the kos of birkas hamazon. Meaning for halachos of kos shel kiddush, it has to match all the laws of the kos of birkas hamazon. Okay, now let's go do our homework. What does that mean? Mem Dalet in the Mishnah Berurah. Kol ma sheton v'chulei. What are some of the things that you need when you use a cup for a kos shel mitzvah like birkas hamazon? Mishnah Berurah says, "Hainu sheyeh kos shalem." Okay, it should be a shalem. It should be full. Okay, which is we had basically already established that part. I thought no, we said the kos malayayin. Or intact. What am I intact?
Not broken.
Oh, the coast itself. Are you saying the coast? Oh, that makes much more sense. Thank you. Because it's not going to relate to the next thing. Now, the actual cup of wine, the cup, not the wine. Thank you, Steve. That the cup is intact, meaning the cup is whole. You shouldn't use a cracked cup. It's chipped. It's missing a piece. You should use a cup that's distinguished for Kiddush. Actually, this will make a lot more sense now. Thank you, Steve. Because the next thing that he says here is v'mudach heitei mibifnim u'mibachutz. Your cup should be washed before you pour wine into it, inside and outside. You should use a clean cup. You're like, really? Did they not use clean cups? Again, this is what I'm saying. Our standards of hygiene and cleanliness are not those of our ancestors. And that is not a knock on our ancestors. This is just a different situation. But they didn't have sinks, exactly. It wasn't so easy. We take it for granted. You can not even lift a finger and push a button and you can wash 35 dishes at the same time. This is not their reality. For them to get a little schmutz on the cup, not a big deal. So when it comes to Kiddush, though, your cup should have been clean, outside and inside. And again, thanks to Steve for the little ha'ara from before. Right? Kos shalei means it's a whole cup, not chipped, not broken. It's Kiddush. Come on, do it the right way. Show some respect to the mitzvah. The whole shar dvarim haniskar le'elbasim and kuf pei gimel le'inyan kos birkas hamazon, and there are other items that come up. It comes to the coast of birkas hamazon that you should make sure to do for any other birkas hamitzvah like Kiddush. An example of those things I'm just going to give you here is, by the way, you're absolutely correct. By the way, Steve, here it says the Kos Shalai, the Mishnah Berurah here says that below pogum bisfaso, like on the rim, it shouldn't have a crack. It's missing a piece on the rim of so it should be a whole cup. The other thing he says here in the earlier siman about this is when you pick up the cup, mekablo b'shtei yadav, you should pick it up with two hands when you pick up the cup for Kiddush. And then when you start, so that you don't spill, right? Pick it up carefully, two hands. Then you're making the Kiddush, hold it in your right hand, and don't use your left hand to help. Your right hand is your strong hand, and if you hold it like this underneath, and you want to put the left hand under that, that's fine. It's the whole to do about how you hold the cup. When you pick up the cup and you're making a kos on a kos shel bracha, whether it's Kiddush, Havdalah, or Birchas Hamazon, you should lift the kos up a tefach from the table. It shouldn't be like just hovering. It should be a tefach, 3.5 inches off the table. It's distinguished. I'm holding this cup up, and here comes an interesting discussion, by the way, about left-handed people. There's actually an interesting statement about left-handed people because here talking about hold it with your right hand. And here is a very important halacha, which is v'yesh mi she'omer she'im hamavarach iter. If the person is iter, they're left-handed, though that's not the literal translation of iter. Iter, I believe, means I think it's cut off. Their hand is doesn't work the right way.
It's pejorative.
Right, correct. You're left-handed, but it's not literal left-handed. But if you're left-handed. So I love this, by the way. If you're left-handed, I apologize. This is offensive. But you should hold your cup in your right hand. Shu small shall call Adam, which is called left-handed on other people. But that's your right hand. Your right hand's on the wrong side, though. Your right hand is on your left side. It's it's not nice for left-handed. But yes, that's a very confusing phrase. Hold it in your right hand, which is what we call left-handed for other people. Okay? So basically, though, if you're left-handed, you should hold the cup for Kiddush in your left hand. Okay? So whatever your dominant hand, like tefillin, exactly. It's not that it's always in your right hand. You should hold the kos shel Kiddush in your dominant hand. Okay? And it talks about not talking during Kiddush, etc., etc. That's not surprising, though. Okay. Now, let's go back to, where were we here? Back upstairs in the Shulchan Aruch. Other halachos. Now, it's a smattering of halachos today. Ready? Ve'omer vayachulu me'umad. So, you're supposed to say vayachulu standing up. As you're making Kiddush, say vayachulu standing up. V'achar kach omer borei pri hagafen. V'achar kach Kiddush. Then after the Vayachulu paragraph, say the Borei Pri Hagafen bracha, and then afterwards you make the Kiddush bracha. Okay, which is what we do. The standing part we'll talk about in a second, but that's the order of the brachos. And it sounds like here, vayachulu should be said standing, but he doesn't really weigh in here on what the position should be during the rest, during Bar Pergafen and Kiddush. He actually leaves it off, which might lead you to believe it should be sitting. Because why point out that vayachulu should be standing and not say anything about the other ones? The implication is it should be sitting. But the Ramah here adds in, "V'yachol la'amod b'shas haKiddush." You can stand. He, I think, is reading it that way too, meaning that the Shulchan Aruch is implying sit, but you can stand if you want during the rest of Kiddush. But he says, "V'yoser tov le'shev." He does say it's better to sit though when you make Kiddush.
Right.
V'noagim. One second. So let's just get all this on the table, and then we'll break it down and get the questions. V'noagim le'shev af b'shas she'omer vayachulu. But there are those. The Ramah points out that the minhag is also to sit even at the time when you say vayachulu. Rak k'shemaschilin, only when you start the kiddush at the very, very beginning. Omdim ktas, you stand for a little bit. Lichvod Hashem, for the glory, the honor of God's name. Ki maschilin yom hashishi vayachulu hashamayim. When we start, we say yom hashishi vayachulu hashamayim. V'nirmaz Hashem b'Roshei Tevos. The Roshei Tevos of Yom HaShishi v'Yechulu HaShamayim spell God's name. Okay, if you take the first letter of each of those, you get God's name. So therefore, the minhag is that you sit the whole Kiddush, but you stand a little bit at the very beginning because they're talking about God's name, so you want to rise when you're describing God. That is what is described here. Yes, Simeon, go ahead with your question now.
Yeah, the notion, even though it is not an absolute and there are other opinions, but the notion of standing, even for just the first paragraph, is contrary to what we learned previously. Ein kiddush ella b'makom seuda, ein seuda ella b'yeshiva.
Right. So, yes, let's actually hold off because the Mishnah Berurah is going to make your point. That those who insist on sitting, are doing it for reasons that Simeon is describing, that it has to do with Kiddush b'makom seuda, and Kaviyus HaSeuda is established by sitting. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. I just want to take a poll here, though. And there's no judgment here, by the way. And the Aruch HaShulchan's line here. By the way, I'll tell you what I do because my father did and what his father did. But the Aruch HaShulchan's line, which I love here, is that when he starts talking about this question about how you stand, to sit, where does he say it here? Oh, he says, "Im tzrichim lasos kiddush me'umad o me'yushav, einam avur lehedja lo b'gemar v'lo b'poskim, umashma de'ein kepeda." The Aruch HaShulchan already says that it's not clear from the Gemara, it's not clear from the poskim. You have to stand, and therefore there's no kepeda. You could do it sitting, or you could do it standing. Simeon's not going to like what I just said, though. But hold off, Simeon. We'll describe why the people who stand are at least justified in doing so. I stand during Kiddush, the entirety of Kiddush. That's what my father did and his father did. And I would assume that that's what his father did. Who here stands the whole time during Kiddush? Okay. Friday night. Yeah. Friday. Okay, so Richie, what do you do? And then you sit. For the brachos. Simeon, what happens in your house?
Absolutely stand. Absolutely.
Even though it goes against what you just said. Okay. I love that you're arguing whatever,
Well, I'm arguing the learning, but I'll tell you, ask the question, how many of us who stand had their fathers and grandfathers also stand?
Correct. I think that there is a very, and I'm going to try to explain today where I think it comes from, having done some research. But Hinda, what do you do in your home?
Everybody stands, and I'm raising my left hand to indicate that. I'm left-handed.
Oh my God.
Some of us are left-handed.
Yeah. According to our tradition, it's actually your right hand, but it's just on the wrong side. Anyways, so it's interesting because my observation on just, again, doing a little quick poll here and going eating at many different homes and whatnot, is that I even see, by the way, when I go to my in-laws, my father-in-law stands during the entirety of Kiddush. Um, so we're going to talk about now why you would sit, why you would stand. And as Daruch HaShulchan I love says, this is not really something that was so spelled out by the Gemara or the Poskim. This is a lot of this has to do with minhag. Even here in the Ramah's words, v'nohagim. And by the way, he's already the one who says v'yachol lamod. You could stand. He says, but I think it's better to sit. And the minhag is even to sit for vayachulu, which that's a little more controversial that way. Okay. Yeah.
I think the sitting part has come back a little bit into vogue.
Yeah.
People more to sit. I think some people have said that the sitting counts more for not the Shabbos Kiddush, but for Yontif Kiddush to sit. You have to, if you start, and the third portion is someone who spoke here, one of the rabbis who spoke here said he believes that the sitting is when you're saying Kiddush for other people, that is what makes them join together.
Okay, good. We're gonna see that right now. Good, excellent. Good, you guys were listening to. I don't know which rabbi was the speaker, but yes. Yeah.
It's proper to stand for this Kiddush.
For the beginning of the Seder.
It's proper to stand. In other words, for all other yontifs.
So I saw that somewhere also. Where did I see that?
Could you repeat what he
Yeah,
said?
Richie just said that he has an old Haggadah, and the instructions in the old Haggadah at Kadesh, at the first step of the Seder, is that for this Kiddush you should stand. Meaning the implication being that usually you don't stand.
Right.
Which I saw that somewhere also in my preparation. I saw something about that. And Sukkah also becomes a big issue, because there you're supposed to stand until you make the Leishev bracha, until after you make the Leishev bracha, which should, and the Rambam is the one I think who says you should stand for the entirety of the Kiddush on Sukkot, on the first night of Sukkot, and then sit, which implies that every other time you should sit. But if I have to give you an instruction to do something differently, that implies that the rest of the time it was another way. So there are a lot of inferences made about the various cases that you've all brought up, which is incredible. So now let's read about it. Yes, Shlomo. This is Friday Night Kiddush. Yes, Friday Night Kiddush. So, Mem, hey, you're supposed to say Vayachulu standing. Omer Vayachulu me'umad. Shehu Eidus al Brias Shamayim va'aretz. The whole point of Vayachulu is to give testimony about the creation of the heavens and the earth. The Eidus ba'ina me'umad. And when you give testimony, you are required to stand. So therefore it makes sense to stand during Vayachulu. V'afal pisha omro batfilon. Yeah, even though you said it in davening, by the way, in the Shemona Esrei, and after the Shemona Esrei, you said Vayachulu. So this is your third time saying Vayachulu, if you said all the tefillah. Hoser v'omro kedei lahotzi banavu v'nei veso. You go back and you say it again in order to be motzi, to help those in your household who hadn't gone to shul, to fulfill their obligation of saying Vayachulu, of testifying to God having created the heavens and the earth. Uva rokeach hevi b'shem midrash. The rokeach brought the name of a midrash. That there's you need to say Vayachulu 3 times on Friday night. Echad batfila, v'echad la'achar hatfila. So 1 time in the middle of Shemona Esrei, 1 time after Shemona Esrei, v'echad alakos, and 1 time over a cup of wine. L'kasvu ha'achronim, because of the medrash, the im shachach lomer Vayachulu b'shas kiddush. Let's say you forgot Vayachulu and making kiddush, you just went right to bar pergafen, etc. And in the middle of the meal, you're like, oh, we never said Vayachulu, which is kind of a strange situation to have happened. But okay. In the middle of the meal, you should take a cup of wine in that scenario, and you should say Vayachulu by itself. Say Vayachulu. It's very important to say Vayachulu. And that's why it's part of the Kiddush liturgy, and one should not skip it, even if they already went to shul. I said Vayachulu, I don't need to say Vayachulu, I did his testimony. No, first of all, the Madrash says say it 3 times. Okay, and I think Richie in the past has pointed out the significance of this, of saying it 3 times, right? Or you brought it as a Kabbalistic We already discussed. Correct, right? And we talked about it in the context of tefillah. And the other piece here to mention about Vayechulu is that it's part of the liturgy, because even if, let's say, you've said it and everyone at the table has already said it before, once something has become like it becomes established as a part of a liturgy, you say it even if there's no reason to say it at that point. So we say Vayechulu no matter what. That way, every week we're covering all of our family members who have not had that opportunity in davening. Mem Vav. The Yoser Tov Leishev, that it's better to sit. The B'chiyai Gav na Mikre Tfei Kiddush Bimkom Seuda. Here's Simeon's logic. Ready? Why is it better to sit? The Mishnah Berurah says because that's because in this scenario where you're sitting, it's better. Tfei means better. It's a better calling of the situation of Kiddush Bimkom Seuda, of Kiddush in the place where I have my feast. Kaven sheyoshe b'mkom seudos, says I'm sitting in the place where I'm eating the Eis HaKiddush at the time of the Kiddush. Okay. V'chein hiskim beveir hagra, and Simeon has a haskama from the Vilna Gaon. Okay, so that's good. You got it. That's a big one to have for you, Simeon. You know, the Vilna Gaon on your side. Okay.
Yeah.
But he also gives mitam acher. There's another reason here. The kaven she'echad poter chavero. One person who's making kiddush is going to discharge the obligation of his friends who are sitting at the table. So ba'inu kiviyus sheyikba'u yachad. In order to help me, this was what Bruce said right a moment ago. In order for me to make kiddush for you, I need to establish some sort of kiviyus here that we're really together in this meal. How do I establish that we're together at a meal? V'yeshiva mikre kaviyus. When we sit together, that's called having kaviyus around the table. We're all sitting at the same table. That makes sense. That now I can make a kiddush for you, and you can answer amen, and we're all covered. And even those who are listening to the kiddush should also sit. Not just that I'm sitting. If you want to establish that we're all together, you sit too if you're listening to my kiddush. And it's good to be careful about this lichatchila, meaning what's lichatchila? A priori, right? And before, that's a good thing to try to aim for. And there are those that say that his opinion is all the gam datahu rak lechatchila. Again, this whole thing is lechatchila. If everyone's still standing, it doesn't mean that the kiddush didn't count for you. But you have to be careful about something. Why is it lechatchila better to do it the other way by sitting? Because, nevertheless, you have to be careful that those who are listening are with you at the time of kiddush in order to discharge their obligation. Words borrowed from the Megillah, that the Jews should not be scattered, all over the place. You're making kiddush, and this one is in the kitchen, and this one is in the living room. I'm making kiddush. Everyone should be together. That's why sometimes, sometimes someone will be preparing food in the kitchen. Say, it's fine, I'm listening. No. Everyone should come stand around the table together. Everyone should be in the same space. It's not ideal that, technically, if they're listening from the kitchen and you're making the kiddush, it works. But, the Jewish people should not be mifuzar miforad bein ha'amim, right? To borrow from the Megillah. We shouldn't be scattered all over the place. We should be, together. And he says here, one is walking over here in this room, and this one's over there. Everyone's not focused. If people are walking around all over the place, one in the kitchen and one in here, that's not kaviyus. Kaviyus really means we should be, at the very least, standing around together. So when you're making kiddush, even if your minhag is to stand during kiddush, you should make sure that all the people are in the room. Maybe they don't have to be right by the chair, but everyone should be in the room. Everyone is looking towards the kiddush. One person is still finishing the salad in the kitchen. You should say, okay, we'll wait for you another, we'll finish until you're finished. You shouldn't jump ahead and make kiddush while somebody is still, finishing things in the kitchen. Simeon, I saw your hand go up. Yeah.
Yes, the Chafetz Chaim that sets forth the notion be'inyan kvius sheyikba'u yachad. We achieve this standing because, and he doesn't mention this, everybody around standing.
Wait, you're, unless it was just my end here, you froze at the most important part of what you said. Can you say that again?
I said, I said where the Chafetz Chaim says be'inyan kvius sheyikba'u yachad, that they should all have this element of togetherness, not somebody's in the kitchen and I hear you and all of that you cited. But you have to realize that you achieve this even when you're standing because everybody at the shulchan is standing.
Right. I mean, there's an idea of like, we're together, everyone, good. Exactly, which is why when a lot of people, I don't know what everyone's been hugging about when you think Shalom Aleichem or Eishes Chayil, I don't know, my house, we often are just sitting. And then we all stand for Kiddush, right? We all literally rise up at the same time. Okay, now everyone stand for Kiddush. So yes, we're all in it together. And that's why it's a very different scenario than, but you can imagine, this you can imagine. You have to be very careful about this. But let's say somebody makes Kiddush, and this is not even a halacha necessarily for Friday night, but let's say you're making Kiddush on Shabbos morning. And it's in shul. And, it's for the people want to eat cholent and crackers and cake and cookies. The person making Kiddush is standing, it's fine. But now you also risk, what happens if people, as long as after the Hashkam minyan is over, right? They make Kiddush around the table, where the Kiddush is. But some people are still talking halfway across the room. They didn't do anything wrong. They're still talking to their friend. And the question is, am I really a part of that Kiddush if I'm, over there and I'm kind of half listening and still talking? But I hear, half of usually the schnapps, I hear half of the shahakol. You're probably not Yotze. You probably need to go make your own Kiddush, which is not a big deal. But, what was that? Yeah, correct. You make your own bracha, but, um, you can imagine a scenario where, again, even if it's a Friday night meal and there's a kid, here in the shul and there's a big crowd and one person's making Kiddush and this person is walking around over here. You have to make very sure you're a part of the same meal and everyone's focusing. Yeah. Shlomo.
We say in the shul.
Yeah.
Then you go eat. How this is it? You make kiddush?
If you have Kiddush b'mkom suda, if you ate the cholent or crackers afterwards, you don't have to go back and make Kiddush again.
In the house, you don't have to
No. If somebody in the house didn't hear Kiddush, you can make Kiddush for them. But you have no obligation. You can go home and begin with Hamotzi Lechem min Haaretz. You can wash your hands, and there's no obligation of Kiddush again.
What about kiddush b'mkom suda? There's no kiddush.
But so without giving away too much, because that's really that's coming up in Reish Ayin Gimel is Kiddush b'mkom seuda. How you define a makom seuda? If you have mizonos, then you're good. So if you have crackers after you hear the Kiddush, if you have enough crackers, 2 crackers, 3 crackers, that's technically enough to call it makom seuda. If you have a piece of cake. And therefore you wouldn't need to make Kiddush again. So we'll define Seuda. It's not the way you think of Seuda. When you think of Seuda, you think of like a banquet, a feast. Doesn't have to be quite that lavish. And so that's why if you ate the cholent, it has barley in it, that's also sufficient. That's Zonos and it's Makom Seuda. Yeah.
Multiple people.
Yeah.
Does everybody have to be sitting? I mean, in the
No.
Shachini brings up Abdullah.
Right.
Apparently, you rely on that everybody should be sitting.
Oh yes, I think that, by the way, people who insist on sitting at Havdalah, I think it's the same Indian here. I think it's the same thing where if you're going to do it sitting, you're ensuring that everybody is there with you. Actually, there was a shul when I was. Right, exactly. Yeah, we're all going to sit around the table. But again, does it have to be? No, it doesn't have to be. I think even those who say you do it sitting acknowledge that's lichatchila in order to capture the kvius issue. You can capture kvius without sitting though, but when you sit, you're really not going to have as many potential issues. as you might have with standing. So take a look now at Mem Zayin. And then afterwards, I'll read a little bit from the Aruch HaShulchan to give us some perspective. So Mem Zayin here that talks about even those who, I'm going to say Vayechulu, they do it sitting. So what's this about? The Kevan she'amruha kvar beis hakneses me'uman. So look, I already said it's standing in shul. I'm good to go. So ein makpidim shuv al zeh. Once I'm going to sit, I'm going to sit for everything. I already did my edus, my testimony. I'm not sure what that means though for the people who didn't go to shul. Did they have to stand while I say Vayachulu sitting? And so my little extra comments here points out that the Pri Megadim says the minhag is to say it standing, even those like what Richie does. Even those who sit during Kiddush, the prevailing minhag that I'm aware of for those who sit is that they still will stand during Vayachulu. Look, maybe there are people who don't do that either. The Ramah was obviously suggesting. Correct. In order to establish a type of kvius, yes. But here, for Vayachulu, that you stand and then you sit. Then my favorite part of my little extra comments here in this Mishnah Berurah edition is that it starts citing all these different Rabbanim. What do? The Chazon Ish, Minhag HaChazon Ish, what was the Minhag of the Chazon Ish and Rav Chaim and Rav Kanievsky? They sat for Vayachulu. So the Chazon Ish didn't stand for Vayachulu, neither did Rav Kanievsky. Chafetz Chaim in the Sefer, that's the Sefer Chafetz Chaim, says that he sat during Vayachulu. So you have the brisk Rav here. He also sat during Vayachulu. You have a lot of big achronim here who sat during Vayachulu. But me'idach, on the other hand, in Igros Moshe, he writes, L'chatchila tzarech lomar Vayachulu ba'amida. Rav Moshe Feinstein said, no, l'chatchila, you should stand when you say Vayachulu, and the rest of the Kiddush you should sit, says Rav Moshe. And the Hilchot Shabbat, I'm not even sure who wrote that sefer, writes that the minhag atzlam la'amod is to stand. V'hu al pi hasod. Why do we stand? It's a secret. So then I was like, okay, there's a secret here? So I tried to uncover the secret a little bit. I didn't fully uncover the secret. But the Aruch HaShulchan, I read you his opening line. His opening line was, there's no kapeda on this. No, not makpid. It has to be standing, sitting. Different minhagim. But what he did help with was giving some context to where some of these things come from, which was very helpful for me. And he writes from the Rambam. He says, Rambam Sof Hilchot Sukkah. Look at the Rambam at the end of Hilchot Sukkah. So you don't have this in front of you. I have my Aruch HaShulchan here, so just listen. Mevur lehejesh she'asu meyushav. It's as clear as daylight that the Rambam made Kiddush sitting. How do we know? Because of Sham, because when it comes to Hilchot Sukkah, he writes, the Belayla Rishon on the first night of Sukkot, Sarich Lasos HaKiddush Be'uman. You need to make the Kiddush standing. And so that way you don't sit before you make a leishev bracha. Now, if you always sat during Kiddush, if you always if you always stood during the whole Kiddush, why would I need to tell you, make sure you don't sit before you do leishev? It's not to imply that usually you sit when you make Kiddush, but here, tonight, don't sit. Okay?
Well, the implication is that the bracha always precedes the act. Even in the case of Hadlakas Neirel Shabbos, the woman is so that even after she says the bracha, she can have an act to rationalize or justify the bracha.
Right. You're saying that's why the whole sitting piece after Leishev in particular.
Right.
Correct.
There's another translation to this. You say Lashem Basukati, you make the do.
Yeah. There's the Shechayanu.
Hashem is all the way to the bottom. Stand up, and then when you go down to it.
Actually, on the first night when you make Kiddush in the Sukkah, You should say Kiddush, then you do Leishev, then you do Shechayanu, because there's a Shechayanu. That Shechayanu also covers the mitzvah of Sukkah. The funny part is on the second night, I believe, and this is, I believe, the common practice, you should flip the order. On the second night of Sukkot, you should make Kiddush, Shechayanu, and then Leishev, because you're allowed to technically make a Shechayanu on the Sukkah before Sukkot. You literally don't do that, but if you made a Shechayanu too early, it still counts. That's why you flip it. So, but the bottom line is that when you do Leishev, the minhag is then you sit down and you drink the wine. Okay, maybe you have to make a Shechayanu still, but here the implication of the Rambam is that you always sit during other kiddushes during the year. V'haravid hisigalav degam az osim yushav, and the Ravid argues and says no on the Rambam, and he says you also sit for this kiddush, which implies again that the Ravid also thought that you sit for kiddush. Okay. That's pretty explicit that you're supposed to make a kiddush sitting. And he says then the Aruch HaShulchan cites the Tosfos and Brachos to Chol Damar Shel Achila O Shasia Shetzarech Lahotzi Acher Mebirchaso Tzarech Lios Miyushav. If you're going to anytime you're eating and drinking and you want to be most of the other people, it needs to be Miyushav, sitting. V'gam Havdalah. Who brought up Havdalah before? Steve brought up Havdalah. Kosvu Shetov Yosef Lasos Miyushav. All right, Shema Minasha, you oath in Miyushav, right? Better to do it sitting. If I say it's better to do it sitting, what do you think he did? He did it sitting, right? So the Chachmei now. So this is it came out. All the sources really point to sitting, but most of us around the table stand. So the Aruch HaShulchan cites the Chachmei HaKabbalah, the sages of Kabbalah. They said you should say Kiddush standing. V'chein hayanoheg ha'arizal, big makubal. The Arizal would make Kiddush standing up. Okay. V'haya ochez hakos keneged hachazeh u'mekadesh. He would hold his cup right here near his chazeh. It means like the breast area. This, right? And the brachos shel hakala tzarech lios me'umad. When you make a bracha under the chuppah for the chassan and kala, you stand. You get called up for a bracha for the Sheva Brachos. You don't sit down for the Sheva Brachos. You stand. Everyone's festive. You stand. V'Shabbos ikrei kala. Shabbos is called a bride. Okay? Kemosha omrim boi kala boi kala. Just like when we say at the end of L'chadodi, we stand up and we turn around. We face the kala. She's coming in. And we even bow towards the kala. And so this is the reason, according to, and this is all found in the Siddur of the Shlah, that people stand. It's actually a bit Kabbalistic because Shabbos is called a kala. And just like at the chuppah, when you make the Sheva Brachos, you stand. The chassan and kala are standing. Everyone stands at a wedding. And so just like that, so too we are me'umad on Friday night when we make Kiddush because Shabbos is a bride. So there's a very deep Kabbalistic thing going on here. Now some of you are like, oh, now I'm going to sit there and Kiddush, Kabbalah. No, if you stand, just know why you do it. At least according to this reason, it has to do with the idea that Shabbos is the bride. And so we stand as we are sanctifying that Shabbos, sanctifying the bride. Umidina, but he says, according to Halacha, the Aruch HaShulchan paskins here, Umidina ain't kipeda. There's really no stand, sit, whatever you do, it's fine. There's no problem. He actually cites also here that if he thinks that everybody thinks that Vayachulu you should stand because this is Edus, this is testimony, but that maybe some people stand at the beginning for Vayer, for Yom HaShishi Vayachulu Hashamayim. It's funny though, but because I mentioned all these poskim who are big, Chazon Ish and the Briskerov and Kanievsky, these are big. They actually sat for Vayachulu as well. But seems that at least in the time of the Aruch HaShulchan, he was not aware of anyone who held of standing during the Vayachulu part of Kiddush. All right, we will pause here because the next part will. The next part is going to require some explanation. If you read ahead for even just a moment, you'll see that they talked about when you're actually making the Kiddush, you're saying Vayachulu, you're supposed to look at the candles. And why you have to look at the candles, boy, it's going to involve gematria. So make sure Gene can't hear what's happening. Okay, next week at the beginning, he's not going to like it. Okay, the gematria is going to be front and center for what we do when we start making kiddush. So there's gonna be a little more. There's gonna be a little bit more of the Kabbalistic thing going on here at the beginning of next week. But then we will we'll talk about if you only have one cup of wine for the whole Shabbos, how do I make Kiddush Friday night and have enough wine for the next day, and for Havdalah and avoiding Kos Pogum? That's what we're going to be discussing next time. Yes, Simeon, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Rav, if you give edus before a Beit Din, and I have never been in an active Beit Din, is it given